In the brutal world of ancient Rome, 35-year-old Marcus Flavius is a hardened gladiator who has survived 15 years in the arena. Once a noble soldier, he was condemned to slavery after refusing to execute innocent villagers during a military campaign. His heart has grown cold, his soul numb to the violence that surrounds him daily. After a particularly savage victory in the Colosseum, Marcus is ordered to clear the underground holding cells beneath the arena, a grim task usually reserved for slaves. There, hidden in a broken wooden cage covered with filthy straw, he discovers 10-year-old Livia, a fragile girl with haunted eyes and chains around her wrists. But what freezes Marcus in absolute horror isn't just finding a child in such conditions, it's the fresh brand on her shoulder, marking her as a sacrifice for the next games, and the realization that she cannot speak, her tongue having been cut out to prevent her from crying for help. As Marcus gently lifts her from the cage, a tattered piece of parchment falls from her clutched hand, a letter from her deceased mother, revealing that Livia is the daughter of the very senator who condemned Marcus to this life of blood and sand 15 years ago. The same senator who now sits in the imperial box, watching gladiators die for his entertainment. This discovery sets Marcus on an impossible path: protect the innocent child of his greatest enemy, navigate the treacherous politics of Rome, and confront the demons of his own past, all while knowing that in 3 days the games will demand either his life or hers in the arena. As an unlikely bond forms between the broken warrior and the silent girl, both will discover that redemption and love can bloom even in the darkest corners of the empire. But the price of salvation may be the ultimate sacrifice. The roar of 70,000 voices shook the very foundations of the Colosseum as Marcus Flavius stood over his fallen opponent, his gladius dripping crimson onto the blood-soaked sand. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the arena floor, turning the scattered blood into dark pools that steamed in the heat. His chest heaved beneath the battered leather armor, each breath burning in his lungs like fire. "Marcus, Marcus," the crowd's chant echoed off the marble columns, a thunderous approval that once might have stirred something in his heart. Now it was merely noise, the sound of Romans hungry for death, their bloodlust temporarily satisfied by the spectacle of men butchering each other for entertainment. He didn't raise his sword in victory. He didn't bow to the imperial box where Senator Gaius Flavius Nero sat with his entourage, golden goblet raised in mock salute. Marcus simply turned and walked toward the gate of life, his sandals leaving bloody footprints across the arena floor. 15 years of survival had taught him that celebration was for fools. In this world, victory today only meant you lived to die another day. But as Marcus disappeared into the shadows beneath the Colosseum, neither he nor the cheering crowd could have known that his greatest battle wasn't the one he'd just won in the arena. It was about to begin in the darkness below, with a discovery that would shatter his carefully built walls of stone and force him to remember what it meant to be human. The underground passages beneath the Colosseum were a world unto themselves, a labyrinth of stone corridors, holding cells and chambers that reeked of sweat, fear, and death. Torches cast dancing shadows on walls stained with decades of bloodshed. The sounds of the arena above were muffled here, replaced by the groans of wounded gladiators, the rattle of chains, and the occasional scream of some poor soul being prepared for the next game. Marcus removed his helmet, revealing a face carved by violence and hardship. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples, and a jagged scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheek, a gift from a Thracian warrior 3 years prior. His brown eyes, once warm and full of idealism, now held the flat, emotionless gaze of a man who had seen too much death. Flavius, the gravelly voice of Quintus, the Lanista's assistant, echoed through the corridor. The fat man waddled toward him, his multiple chins jiggling with each step. "The master wants you to clear the lower cells. Some of the cages broke during the last earthquake tremor. Toss any dead animals in the pit. Repair what you can." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm a gladiator, not a stable boy." Quintus's piggy eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. You're a slave, Flavius. You're whatever the master says you are. Unless you'd prefer the whip. His hand moved to the coiled leather at his belt. For a moment, Marcus considered driving his fist into that smug face. But 15 years had also taught him when to pick his battles. He gave a curt nod and turned toward the descending stairs that led to the lower levels, places even most gladiators avoided. The deeper chambers were used for storing exotic animals for the games, holding condemned criminals and occasionally disposing of bodies that no one claimed. The air grew colder as Marcus descended, the torchlight more sparse. Water dripped from cracks in the ancient stone, creating puddles that reflected the flickering flames like pools of liquid fire. He'd been down here only twice before, and both times had been enough. The last visit 6 months ago had been to help drag out the bodies of a dozen Christians who'd been torn apart by lions. The memory still haunted his dreams sometimes, not because of the gore, but because of the peaceful expressions on their faces, as if death had been a release rather than a punishment. The first cell he checked contained the corpse of a tiger, its magnificent orange and black coat now matted with dried blood. The great beast had fought valiantly in yesterday's games before succumbing to spear wounds. Marcus paused, studying the animal's face. Even in death, it maintained a dignity that most men lacked in life. "You were a noble creature," he murmured, one of the few words he'd spoken all day. "More noble than the men who killed you for sport." He moved to the next cell, then the next, finding mostly what he expected: broken cages, scattered bones, the detritus of Rome's insatiable appetite for spectacle. His mind wandered as he worked, drifting to thoughts of escape, of freedom, of the life he'd lost 15 years ago when idealism had cost him everything. He had been a centurion once, a respected officer in the legions. His crime, refusing follow orders to massacre a village of civilians suspected of harboring rebels. His commander had given him a choice: execute the villagers or face execution himself. Marcus had chosen a third path. He'd helped the villagers escape and turned himself in, hoping that Roman justice would recognize the difference between honor and blind obedience. Instead, he'd been stripped of his rank, his property seized, and sentenced to fight as a gladiator, a living death designed to break his spirit before ultimately breaking his body. The senator who had pronounced judgment, Gaius Flavius Nero, a distant cousin who had relished the opportunity to humble a man whose very existence had been a reminder of the family's more honorable past. Marcus pushed the memories aside. Dwelling on the past was a luxury he couldn't afford. He approached the final cell in the deepest part of the lower chambers. The iron bars were bent, twisted by some force he couldn't immediately identify. His torch revealed a scene of destruction: overturned feeding troughs, scattered straw, and in the corner, a wooden cage that had been partially crushed. He was about to turn away when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the constant drip of water and distant echoes from above. A whimper, soft, frightened, barely human. Marcus froze, every sense suddenly alert. He raised his torch higher, peering into the shadows. Who's there? Silence. Then, that sound again, a desperate, animal-like whimper that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He stepped carefully over the debris, moving toward the broken cage. The smell here was worse, not just animal waste, but human suffering, unwashed bodies, and fear that seemed to seep from the very stones. As he drew closer, the torchlight revealed something that made his breath catch in his throat. A small hand, pale and thin, protruding from beneath the straw and broken wood. "Gods above," Marcus breathed, dropping to his knees. He set the torch in a wall bracket and began carefully removing the debris. His hands, so skilled at dealing death, now moved with surprising gentleness. The cage had partially collapsed, but someone had wedged themselves into the corner where the structure still held. As Marcus pulled away the last of the straw, he found himself staring into the most haunting pair of eyes he'd ever seen. A little girl, perhaps 10 years old, lay curled in the wreckage, her tiny body trembling. She wore nothing but a torn, filthy tunic that might have once been white. Her dark hair was matted with dirt and blood, her face gaunt from hunger. But it was her eyes that struck him. Large, brown eyes that held a world of suffering no child should ever know. She stared at him with a mixture of terror and desperate hope, like a wounded animal uncertain whether the approaching human meant salvation or death. "Easy, little one," Marcus said softly, a tone he hadn't used in years. "I won't hurt you, let me help you." She didn't move, didn't make a sound. As Marcus reached toward her, she flinched violently, pressing herself harder against the broken cage. That's when he saw the chains, iron manacles around her wrists and ankles, connected by short lengths of chain that prevented her from standing fully upright. Rage flared in Marcus's chest, hot and fierce. What kind of monster would do this to a child? "I'm going to get you out," he said, keeping his voice low and calm. "These chains, I'll remove them, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" The girl's eyes searched his face, looking for something, honesty perhaps, or humanity. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she gave the tiniest nod. Marcus examined the manacles. They were crude iron, locked with simple mechanism. He drew the small knife he kept hidden in his boot against the rules. But rules meant little to a man who lived every day on the edge of death. The locks were poor quality, designed to restrain, not to withstand a determined effort to break them. As he worked on the first manacle, the girl remained perfectly still, barely breathing. Her skin where the iron had rested was rubbed raw, infected in places. Marcus felt his fury growing with each mark of abuse he discovered. The first lock clicked open, then the second. As he moved to her ankles, the girl suddenly grabbed his hand. Her grip was weak, but urgent. She was trying to tell him something, her mouth moving, but Marcus's blood ran cold as understanding dawned. Her mouth opened, but only a soft, desperate sound emerged. Not words, not even screams. Where her tongue should have been, there was only scarred tissue. They had cut out her tongue. "Dear gods," Marcus whispered, his hands beginning to shake with rage. "Who did this to you?" She couldn't answer, of course, but her eyes filled with tears, not of pain but of relief that someone finally understood, that someone saw her suffering. Marcus finished removing the ankle chains, his movements now mechanical as he fought to control the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm his carefully maintained numbness. When the last manacle fell away, the girl didn't move at first, as if she'd forgotten what freedom felt like. "Come here," Marcus said gently, opening his arms. After a moment's hesitation, she collapsed against him, her small body racked with silent sobs. He held her carefully, shocked by how light she was, how fragile. She felt like she might break if he held her too tightly. As she clung to him, he felt something crinkle against his chest. Looking down, he saw she clutched a piece of parchment in her left hand, holding it as if it were more precious than life itself. The paper was stained and worn, as if it had been read countless times. "What's this?" he asked softly, gently prying her fingers open. She released it reluctantly, watching his face with those enormous, terrified eyes as he unfolded the parchment. The torchlight revealed elegant Latin script, faded but still legible. "My dearest Livia, if you are reading this, then I have failed you, in the worst possible way. I am dead, and you are alone. Your father, Senator Gaius Flavius Nero, does not know of your existence. Our love was forbidden, a secret affair that produced the greatest joy of my life, you. I am dying from fever as I write this. The physician says I have hours, perhaps a day at most. I have no family to leave you with, no friends who would dare cross your father by sheltering his illegitimate daughter. I write this in the hope that someone with mercy might find it, might help you. You are innocent of all crimes except being born. Please, if there is any kindness left in this cruel world, let it find my daughter. Be strong, my sweet Livia. Remember that your mother loved you more than all the stars in the sky. Julia Marcella, written this day, the Ides of March in the 187th year since the founding of Rome. Marcus's hands trembled as he read the letter once, then twice. Unable to believe what he was seeing, he looked at the girl, Livia, with new eyes. The date on the letter was 3 weeks ago. Senator Nero, he breathed. Your father is Gaius Flavius Nero. Livia nodded, fresh tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. The man who had condemned Marcus to this living hell. The man who sat in the imperial box above, drinking wine and watching men die. That man had a daughter, hidden down here in the darkness, branded and mutilated, and left to die. Marcus stood slowly, Livia still in his arms. He could feel her heart beating against his chest, rapid as a bird's. His mind raced, trying to understand who had done this, who knew about Nero's secret daughter, and had decided to handle the problem this way. As he turned to leave the cell, something caught the torchlight, a mark on Livia's shoulder. He'd thought it was dirt, but now he saw it clearly. A fresh brand, burned into her tender flesh, just days ago. The mark of the condemned. The symbol used to identify criminals and slaves, designated for special deaths in the arena. No, Marcus whispered, understanding flooding through him like ice water. No, they can't. But even as he spoke, he knew in 3 days there would be special games to celebrate the emperor's birthday. The grand finale was always the same. Condemned prisoners, Christians and other criminals thrown to the beasts, or forced to fight trained gladiators. Livia had been branded for the games. Someone had discovered Nero's illegitimate daughter, and rather than expose the scandal publicly, had arranged for her to die in the arena, where her death would be dismissed as just another criminal meeting justice. The final horror was the severed tongue. They'd made sure she couldn't speak, couldn't tell anyone who she was, couldn't plead for mercy or explain her innocence. Marcus stood there in the torchlight, holding the trembling child, and felt something crack in the walls he'd built around his heart. For 15 years he'd survived by feeling nothing, caring for nothing, living only to fight another day. But this was too much. This child, guilty of nothing but being born, sentenced to die for political convenience. His greatest enemy's daughter, left in the darkness to await death. And now she clung to him, her small arms wrapped around his neck, trusting him completely because he was the first person in weeks who had shown her even a scrap of kindness. I've got you, Marcus heard himself say, the words coming from some deep place he'd thought long dead. I won't let them hurt you anymore. I swear it. It was a foolish promise, an impossible promise. He was a slave, a gladiator, with no power, no freedom, no ability to protect even himself, let alone a condemned child. But as Livia's grip tightened, and he felt her silent tears soaking into his shoulder, Marcus knew he would keep that promise or die trying. The question was, how does a man with nothing save a child, sentenced to death by the most powerful forces in Rome? As he carried Livia toward the stairs, leaving the broken cage and chains behind, Marcus Flavius didn't have an answer. But for the first time in 15 years he had something more dangerous than skill with a sword. He had a reason to fight. And in the darkness beneath the Colosseum, where death was bought and sold like cheap wine, that reason would have to be enough. Marcus climbed the stone stairs carefully, each step measured to avoid jarring the child in his arms. Livia remained perfectly still, as if afraid that any movement might shatter this fragile moment of safety. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, hot against his neck, and he could feel every bone in her small body through the ragged tunic. His mind raced as he ascended. What was he doing? He couldn't simply walk through the gladiator quarters carrying a branded child. Questions would be asked. Quintus would report to the lanista. The guards would intervene, and when they discovered who she was, or rather, what she was marked as, they would tear her from his arms and throw her back into the darkness, or worse, advance her execution. As he neared the upper level, Marcus heard voices echoing down the corridor, guards making their round. He pressed himself against the wall, stepping into a shallow alcove where old weapons were stored. Livia seemed to understand the danger instinctively. She buried her face against his shoulder and didn't make a sound, told him 3 more bodies for the morning games. one guard was saying, his voice growing louder as they approached. The Christians are running out, might have to use some of the thieves instead, hardly makes for good sport, the second guard complained. Christians at least pray and sing, makes the crowd feel righteous when the lions tear them apart. Common thieves just scream and beg. Their footsteps passed by the alcove. Marcus held his breath, feeling Livia's tiny hands clutching his tunic. The guards continued down the corridor, their voices fading into echoes. When silence returned, Marcus emerged from the alcove. He couldn't go to the main Gladiator barracks, too many eyes, too many questions. But where else could he take her? His quarters consisted of a small cell with a straw mattress and a single blanket, shared with 3 other fighters. There was nowhere to hide a child, nowhere she would be safe. His gaze fell on the medical chamber, a larger room where the arena's physician tended to wounded gladiators. At this hour, with the day's games concluded, it would likely be empty. The physician, a Greek named Alexios, always retired to his private quarters before sunset to avoid the barbarians, as he called the gladiators. Marcus moved quickly down the corridor, checking over his shoulder. The medical chamber's door was ajar, and as he'd hoped, the room was deserted. He slipped inside and closed the door behind him, sliding the bolt home. The chamber smelled of herbs, wine vinegar, and blood, a combination that had become almost comforting after years of being stitched back together here. Torches burned in wall brackets, illuminating tables laden with bronze instruments, clay jars of ointments, and strips of linen for bandages. In the corner stood a small bed where the physician sometimes slept when tending to gravely injured fighters. Marcus carried Livia to this bed and gently set her down. She immediately curled into a ball, her arms wrapped around herself protectively. In the better light he could see the full extent of her condition, and what he saw made his stomach turn. She was starving, her ribs visible beneath the torn tunic. Dark bruises covered her arms and legs, some fresh, others faded to yellow and green. The brand on her shoulder was infected, the flesh around it angry and red. Dried blood matted her hair, and her feet were cut and swollen, but it was her eyes that haunted him most. Those large, dark eyes that had seen horrors no child should witness, that held a depth of suffering beyond her years. "Let me look at you," Marcus said softly, kneeling beside the bed. "I won't hurt you, Livia. I just need to see how badly you're injured." At the sound of her name, Livia's eyes widened. Her mouth formed a silent question. "How do you know my name?" Marcus held up the letter, still clutched in his hand. "Your mother's letter. She loved you very much. I can see that in every word." Fresh tears spilled down Livia's cheeks. She reached for the letter with trembling hands, and Marcus gave it to her. She pressed it against her heart, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Marcus turned away, giving her a moment of privacy with her grief. He moved to the physician's supplies, selecting what he would need: clean water, soft cloths, healing salve, clean bandages. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, though they trembled slightly. When had he last cared for someone other than himself? When had he last felt this overwhelming urge to protect, to heal, to nurture? 15 years ago, he realized, before the arena had carved away everything soft and human, leaving only the hard, cold survivor. He returned to Livia with a basin of water and clean cloth. "I need to clean your wounds," he said gently. "It will hurt, but the infection will kill you if we don't treat it. Do you understand?" Livia nodded, her jaw set with a determination that seemed far too mature for a 10-year-old child. She laid back on the bed, still clutching her mother's letter in one hand, and stared at the ceiling with resignation. Marcus began with her feet, carefully washing away the dirt and blood. She flinched when he touched the deeper cuts, but made no sound. Not because she was brave, he realized, but because she had no voice to cry out with. "You're very strong," he told her, as he worked, "stronger than most men I've fought beside." As he cleaned each wound, he found himself talking to her, something he hadn't done with anyone in years. Perhaps it was easier because she couldn't respond, couldn't judge, couldn't betray, or perhaps it was because she reminded him of someone. "I had a daughter once," he heard himself say, the words emerging from a place he'd locked away long ago. "Her name was Cassia. She would have been about your age now had she lived." Livia's eyes moved to his face, questioning. Marcus's hands stilled for a moment as the memories flooded back. Memories he'd fought so hard to suppress. The same fever that killed your mother. It swept through Rome 12 years ago, taking thousands. "My wife tried to shield Cassia, kept her indoors away from the sick, but the fever found her anyway." He resumed his work, cleaning the infected brand on Livia's shoulder with careful precision. "My wife blamed me. If I hadn't been condemned to the arena," she said, "we would have had money for better physicians, better care. She left me after Cassia died, found a merchant willing to overlook her association with a gladiator. I haven't seen her since." The infection around the brand was worse than he'd thought. He would need to apply the strongest salve, the kind that burned like fire, but could draw out the poison. "This will hurt," he warned. Livia nodded, and he saw her grip her mother's letter more tightly. Marcus applied the salve as gently as possible, but even so, Livia's entire body went rigid with pain. Tears streamed down her face, but no sound emerged. Her jaw clenched so hard he feared she might crack her teeth. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. "I'm so sorry." When the worst was over, he bandaged her shoulder and moved to the other wounds. As he worked, he continued talking, perhaps because the silence was too heavy, or perhaps because this child needed to hear a human voice speaking with kindness. "Your father," he said carefully, watching her reaction. "Senator Nero, did he know about you?" Livia shook her head. "Your mother kept you secret." A nod. "And after she died, who found you?" Livia's face crumpled with fresh anguish. She made gestures with her hands, pointing to her mouth, to her shoulder, to the floor. Marcus tried to understand, but the meaning escaped him. "Someone discovered you after your mother died," he guessed. "Someone who knew your father would deny you, who decided to dispose of you quietly." Livia's nod was barely perceptible. Marcus's rage burned hotter. Someone in the senator's household, perhaps a servant or official, had found the orphaned child and chosen the cruelest possible solution. Rather than simply killing her quickly, they'd branded her, mutilated her, and condemned her to die in the arena, ensuring that even if she tried to reveal her identity, no one would believe a tongueless slave child. "Do you know who it was?" Marcus asked. Livia hesitated, then nodded slowly. Her small hand reached out and gripped his wrist with surprising strength. With her other hand, she began to trace letters on his palm, laboriously spelling out a name. Marcus Flavius. Marcus's blood ran cold. "Your father's cousin, the man who sentenced me to the arena." Livia's eyes widened in surprise, then she nodded emphatically. Her fingers moved again on his palm. "Sameman. The same man," Marcus breathed, the pieces falling into place with horrifying clarity. "Nero condemned me, and now his cousin Marcus Flavius. They're working together." But no, that made no sense. If they were allies, why would the cousin try to eliminate Nero's daughter? Unless understanding struck him like a physical blow. "Your mother had proof that you were Nero's daughter. Papers. Perhaps. Evidence that could ruin him if revealed. And Marcus Flavius, my namesake, found them when your mother died." Livia nodded vigorously, tears streaming down her face. "He's blackmailing your father," Marcus concluded, "using you as leverage. But he couldn't let you live, because you're a witness. So he branded you, cut out your tongue, and arranged for you to die in the arena, where it would look like just another execution." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. The child was a pawn in a political game she couldn't possibly understand, sentenced to die to protect the secrets and ambitions of powerful men. Marcus finished bandaging her wounds and sat back, studying the fragile girl on the bed. She looked marginally better now, clean at least, and her wounds tended, but she was still starving, still weak, still marked for death. "We have 3 days," he said, more to himself than to her. 3 days before the Emperor's Games, when they'll come for you. Livia's eyes held a question. What will you do? Marcus wished he had an answer. He was a slave, with no rights, no freedom, no power beyond his skill with the sword. How could he possibly save her? A knock on the door made them both freeze. "Flavius," Quintus's voice called from outside. "I know you're in there. Open this door immediately." Marcus's mind raced. If Quintus discovered Livia, it would be over. But if he didn't open the door, the fat man would fetch the guards, and they would break it down. He looked at Livia, who had gone perfectly still, her eyes wide with terror. There was nowhere to hide her. The room was too small, too open. "Just a moment," Marcus called, trying to keep his voice steady. He turned to Livia and whispered urgently, "Under the bed, quickly, and don't make a sound." Livia scrambled off the bed and wriggled underneath, pulling the hanging sheet down to conceal herself. Marcus arranged the fabric to hide her completely, then moved to the door. He opened it to find Quintus standing there with 2 guards, his face red with anger. "What is the meaning of this, locking yourself in the medical chamber? You were ordered to clear the lower cells," not Quintus's eyes swept the room, taking in the basin of bloody water, the discarded bandages, the disturbed medical supplies. "What have you been doing?" he demanded suspiciously. Marcus gestured to a fresh cut on his forearm, a minor wound from the day's combat that he'd neglected to mention. Tending to this, the physician was absent, and it needed cleaning. Quintus's piggy eyes narrowed. "You could have had any of the slaves do that." "I prefer to tend my own wounds," Marcus said evenly. "Old habit from my days in the legions." The fat man wasn't satisfied, but he couldn't argue with the logic. "Well, you're done here. The master wants to see you in his chambers. Immediately." Marcus's stomach tightened. The Lanista, the master of the Gladiator school, rarely summoned fighters personally unless something was wrong. "What does he want? How should I know?" Quintus snapped. "I'm not his confidant, but I'd hurry if I were you. He's in a foul mood." Marcus nodded and stepped out of the medical chamber, pulling the door closed behind him. As he followed Quintus down the corridor, he could only pray that Livia would remain hidden silent until he returned. If he returned, the Lanista's chambers were located in the private section of the complex, far from the squalor, where the gladiators lived. The walls here were decorated with frescoes, the floors covered with intricate mosaic. Oil lamps burned in ornate holders, filling the air with the scent of expensive perfumed oil. Quintus knocked on the heavy wooden door, then pushed it open. "Flavius, as you requested, master." "Send him in," came the cultured voice of Lucius alias Corvus, the Lanista who owned Marcus and 50 other gladiators. Marcus entered to find Corvus standing by a window that overlooked the arena. The Lanista was a small man, barely reaching Marcus's shoulder, but he commanded absolute power over everyone in his ludus. His hair was carefully oiled and arranged, his tunic made of the finest linen, his fingers heavy with gold rings. "Marcus Flavius," Corvus said without turning, "my champion, my finest investment. Do you know how much coin you've earned me over the years?" "No, master," Marcus replied carefully. "Thousands upon thousands of denarii," Corvus continued, finally turning to face him. "Your fights are legendary. The crowd loves you." The noble soldier turned gladiator, fighting with honor, even in disgrace, a beautiful story. Marcus remained silent, sensing danger in the Lanista's words. "But every investment eventually loses value," Corvus continued, his eyes cold despite his pleasant tone. "You're 35 now. How much longer can you survive in the arena? Enter year 2. I've seen gladiators decline rapidly once they pass 35. The reflexes slow, the body doesn't heal as quickly." "I can still fight," Marcus said firmly. "Oh, I know you can. Today's victory proved that." Corvus moved closer, studying Marcus like a merchant, evaluating livestock. "But I've received an interesting proposition, one that would earn me more than a dozen of your victories combined." Marcus's blood chilled. "What proposition?" Corvus smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Senator Gaius Flavius Nero has offered to purchase you for an extraordinary sum. He wants you for the Emperor's Games in 3 days, a special match. His champion against Rome's finest gladiator, a fight to the death. Marcus's mind reeled. Nero wanted to buy him. Why? Unless the senator has a particular interest in your death, it seems. Corvus continued. Something about settling old family grievances. Apparently the fact that you share his family name has been an embarrassment for years. He wants that stain removed permanently. You're selling me to him, Marcus stated flatly. For triple what you're worth, Corvus confirmed. The contract is already drawn up. In 2 days, you'll be transferred to the Ludus Magnus, the Imperial Gladiator School. There you'll train for your final fight against Priscus, the Emperor's personal champion. Priscus. The name sent a chill down Marcus's spine. The Gaul was a legend in the arena, undefeated in 47 matches. Men spoke his name in whispers, calling him the Beast of the North. He was younger, faster, and utterly ruthless. You're sending me to die, Marcus said quietly. Corvus shrugged. We all die eventually. At least you'll do it earning me a fortune. Unless, of course, you somehow manage to defeat Priscus, in which case you'll win your freedom. That's the Emperor's decree for the birthday games. Any gladiator who survives all 3 rounds wins his freedom. Freedom. The word tasted like ash in Marcus's mouth. For 15 years he'd dreamed of freedom, but now, with Livia hidden beneath the physician's bed, freedom meant abandoning a helpless child to her fate. When do I leave? He asked. 2 days, as I said. You'll spend tomorrow preparing, settle any affairs. The guards will come for you at dawn the day after. Corvus waved his hand dismissively. You may go, and Marcus, don't do anything foolish. The senator has paid too much for you to have you disappear or injure yourself. I've doubled the guards watching the gladiator quarters. Marcus bowed and turned to leave, his mind spinning with this new complication. As he reached the door, Corvus spoke again. Oh, and Marcus, I hear you were in the medical chamber. Take care of that wound. I wouldn't want my investment damaged before delivery. Back in the corridor, Marcus stood for a moment, trying to process everything. In 2 days, he would be transferred to the Imperial Ludus. 3 days after that, he would likely be dead. And Livia, what would happen to her? He couldn't take her with him to the Imperial School. He couldn't hide her for long in the current quarters, and if he tried to escape, he would be hunted down and killed. But if he did nothing, she would die in the arena, torn apart by beasts, or forced to fight trained gladiators while the crowd cheered her suffering. His daughter's face flashed in his memory, little Cassia, who had died while he was chained in this very ludus, unable to even attend her funeral. He'd failed her. He'd failed his wife. He'd failed everyone he'd ever tried to protect. But perhaps, just perhaps, he didn't have to fail Livia. An idea began to form in his mind, desperate and probably suicidal, but it was the only chance he could see. He would need help. Help from people he'd kept at arm's length for years, people he'd never allowed close because closeness meant vulnerability. As he hurried back toward the medical chamber, Marcus Flavius made a decision that would either save them both or doom them to deaths more horrible than anything the arena could offer. But first, he had to get Livia to safety, or at least to the closest thing to safety that existed in a world built on blood and spectacle. He opened the door to the medical chamber to find it empty, or seemingly so. But when he knelt beside the bed, he saw Livia's wide eyes staring out at him from the shadows beneath. "It's safe," he whispered. "Come out." She emerged slowly, covered in dust from the floor. In her hand, she still clutched her mother's letter. Marcus sat on the floor beside her and found himself doing something he hadn't done in 15 years. He made a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. "I'm going to save you," he said, looking into those haunted eyes. "I don't know how yet, but I swear on my daughter's memory, on everything I once held sacred, you will not die in that arena." You will not become another victim of Rome's cruelty. Livia's small hand reached out and touched his scarred face, as if testing whether he was real or just another dream in her nightmare. When he didn't pull away, she leaned against him, this broken child and this broken man finding solace in each other's presence. And for the first time in 15 years, Marcus Flavius felt something stir in his chest, something he'd thought had died with his daughter. Hope, dangerous, foolish, impossible hope. But in the darkness beneath the Colosseum, where death was the only certainty, hope was the most rebellious act of all. The night had fallen over Rome, bringing with it a blessed coolness that seeped into the underground chambers of the Ludus. Marcus sat on the floor of the medical chamber, his back against the wall, watching Livia sleep on the physician's bed. She'd finally surrendered to exhaustion an hour ago, her small body curled protectively around her mother's letter. In sleep she looked even younger than her 10 years, fragile and innocent in a way that made Marcus's chest ache. The bruises on her face stood out starkly against her pale skin, and even unconscious, she occasionally whimpered, trapped in nightmares he couldn't protect her from. He needed a plan, a real one, not just desperate wishes and impossible promises. The facts were brutal and simple. In 2 days he would be transferred to the Ludus Magnus. Guards would be watching his every move. Until then, Livia was marked for death in the arena during the Emperor's birthday games, and somewhere above them Senator Nero and his cousin Marcus Flavius were playing political games with lives as their currency. Marcus closed his eyes, forcing himself to think like a soldier again, like the centurion he'd been before the arena had tried to strip away everything but the killer. Every problem had a solution. Every fortress had a weakness. He just needed to find it. A soft knock on the door made his eyes snap open. His hand instinctively moved to where his gladius would be, but of course he was unarmed outside the arena. "Who's there?" he called quietly, positioning himself between the door and Livia. "It's Alexios," came a heavily accented Greek voice. "The physician. I need to retrieve some supplies." Marcus cursed silently. Of all the people to appear now, but perhaps this was an opportunity. Alexios was no friend to the Lanista or the games. The physician had made his distaste for the whole bloody business clear on many occasions. Marcus unlocked the door and opened it just enough to slip through, pulling it closed behind him. Alexios stood in the corridor, a small, wiry man with intelligent dark eyes and silver-streaked hair. He carried a leather satchel and wore the expression of chronic disapproval that seemed permanently etched on his face. "Flavius," Alexios said, eyeing him suspiciously. "What are you doing in my medical chamber?" "I needed supplies," Marcus replied carefully. "For a wound. A wound that required you to bolt the door." Alexios's eyebrows rose. "How interesting. Step aside. I need to collect some items for another patient." Marcus didn't move. "What patient?" "That is none of your concern, Gladiator." Alexios tried to push past him, but Marcus blocked his way. The physician's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me? I could have you whipped for this." "I'm not threatening you," Marcus said quietly, "but I need your help, and I hope you might be willing to give it." "Help?" Alexios laughed bitterly. "I'm a physician trapped in this temple of death, forced to patch up men so they can be butchered again for entertainment. I help no one. I merely delay the inevitable." "What if you could do more than delay it?" Marcus pressed. "What if you could actually save a life, a completely innocent life?" Something flickered in Alexios's eyes. "What are you talking about?" Marcus made a decision. Trust was a gamble, but he was out of options. He opened the door to the medical chamber, revealing Livia still sleeping on the bed. Alexios's face went pale. "Is that a child?" "What in Zeus's name?" "Please," Marcus said urgently. "Just listen. Give me 5 minutes, and if you still want to report me to the guards, I won't stop you." The physician stared at Livia, then at Marcus, clearly wrestling with himself. Finally he nodded curtly and stepped into the chamber. Marcus closed and bolted the door behind them. In hushed tones, Marcus told him everything: the discovery in the broken cage, the letter from Livia's mother, the brand marking her for the arena, the severed tongue, and the political conspiracy involving Senator Nero and his cousin. Alexios listened in silence, his face growing darker with each revelation. When Marcus finished, the physician moved to the bed and gently examined Livia without waking her. His practiced eyes took in the wounds, the brand, and the scarred stump where her tongue had been. "Animals," Alexios whispered, his hands trembling with rage. "They are worse than animals. At least beasts kill for food or territory. This is cruelty for the sake of power." "Can you help her?" Marcus asked. Alexios turned to face him. "Help her? How? You're a gladiator, a slave. I'm a physician bound by contract to this ludus. Neither of us has the power to save her from the arena." "I know it seems impossible." "Seems impossible?" Alexios interrupted. "It is impossible. Even if we could somehow smuggle her out of here, where would she go? She's branded as condemned. Any official who sees that mark would send her straight back to the arena. Or worse. And you're being sold to the Ludus Magnus. In 2 days, you'll be locked in the Emperor's own gladiator school. Even if by some miracle you defeat Priscus and win your freedom, she'll already be dead." Marcus's jaw clenched. "I know all that, but I have to try. I failed my own daughter. I won't fail this one." Alexios studied him for a long moment. "You were a father, once, before the arena took everything." The physician sighed and sat heavily on a stool, his anger seeming to drain away, leaving only weariness. "I had a daughter too, in Athens. She would be about this girl's age now." "Would be?" Marcus asked quietly. "I was accused of helping political dissidents, which was true actually. I treated rebels wounded in their fight against Roman occupation. The authorities gave me a choice: serve as a physician in the gladiator schools of Rome, or watch my family be sold into slavery." Alexios's voice was hollow. "I chose exile, thinking I could earn enough to eventually buy their freedom. But the fever came to Athens 2 years ago. My wife, my daughter, my son, all dead before I even received news." The two men stood in silence, united by the ghost of lost children. "That's why you hate this place," Marcus said. "I hate it because it represents everything wrong with Rome: power without mercy, strength without honor, spectacle without humanity." Alexios looked at Livia. "But perhaps we can save one innocent life from this machine of death." Hope flared in Marcus's chest. "You'll help?" "I'll try," Alexios caressed, "though I make no promises. First, the child needs proper care. Those wounds, especially the brand, could still kill her from infection, and she's severely malnourished." "Can you treat her here, without anyone knowing?" Alexios considered. "The medical chamber is my domain. Most avoid it, especially at night. Too many memories of pain and death. I could tend to her, at least for a day or two, but that only solves the immediate problem." "What about when you're transferred?" "I've been thinking about that," Marcus said, the plan that had been forming in his mind becoming clearer. "There's someone who might help, someone who has reason to hate Senator Nero as much as I do." "Who?" "Cassia Sabina," Marcus said. "A slave woman who works in Senator Nero's household." Alexios frowned. "I don't understand. Why would someone in Nero's household help his daughter?" "Because Cassia isn't just any slave. She was the senator's mistress for years, until he tired of her and demoted her to household duties. She knows all his secrets, all his crimes, and she has access to places and information we don't." "You're suggesting we contact someone inside the senator's own house?" Alexios looked incredulous. "How would we even get a message to her?" "The market," Marcus explained. "Tomorrow is a free day, no games. Some gladiators are allowed to visit the market under guard to purchase personal items. I've earned that privilege through my victories. Cassia shops for the household every morning. If I can speak to her, Convince her to help. That's a long chain of ifs. Gladiator. Do you have a better idea? Alexios had no answer to that. A small sound made them both turn. Livia was awake, her dark eyes watching them with the awareness of a hunted animal. She sat up slowly, wincing at the pain from her wound. Easy, child, Alexios said gently in Greek, then switched to Latin. I'm a physician. I'm going to help you. Livia looked at Marcus questioningly. It's all right, Marcus assured her. Alexios he's a friend. We can trust him. The word friend felt strange on his tongue. He hadn't had a friend in 15 years. But somehow, bonded by their shared loss and their determination to save this child, it felt right. Alexios approached the bed slowly, speaking in soothing tones as he examined his earlier work. Marcus did a passable job with your wounds, but I can do better. The brand especially, it needs more than simple salve. He opened his satchel and withdrew various implements and jars. As he worked, he continued talking, perhaps understanding that Livia needed the comfort of a gentle voice. I'm going to make you a special poultice for that brand. Honey and herbs that will draw out the infection and help it heal without such terrible scarring. And we need to get some food into you. Real food, not the slop they feed the gladiators. Marcus watched as the physician worked with practiced skill, his manner completely transformed from the bitter, cynical man who had entered the chamber. This was Alexios the healer. The man who had chosen exile rather than let his family suffer. The man whose own daughter's memory drove him to save another man's child. There, Alexios said finally, securing the last bandage. That should help considerably, but you need rest, food and time to heal. Luxuries we don't have much of. Livia's hand moved to Marcus's, and she began tracing letters on his palm again. Thankyou. She's thanking you, Marcus told Alexios. The physician's eyes glistened. Poor child, to suffer so much and still have gratitude left. He cleared his throat roughly. Well, we need to be practical. Marcus, if you're going to the market tomorrow, you'll need coin to make the meeting seem legitimate, and to purchase food for the girl. I have some savings, Marcus said, winnings from private bets on my fights. Good. Buy bread, cheese, dried fruits, things that won't spoil quickly. And while you're making contact with this Cassia woman, I'll continue treating the child. Alexios paused. But what's the endgame here? Even if Cassia agrees to help, even if we manage to keep the girl hidden until your transfer, then what? Then we get her out of Rome entirely, Marcus said, the plan fully formed now in his mind. Away from Nero, away from the arena, somewhere she can have a life. You make it sound simple, Alexios said dryly. Escaping Rome with a branded slave child. I'm sure the city gates will just wave you through. Not me, Marcus corrected. I'll be in the Ludus Magnus. But Cassia, if she agrees, she has freedom of movement within the city. She could arrange passage for Livia. Passage to where? With what money? And how would a mute child survive alone, even if she escaped? I don't have all the answers, Marcus admitted, but I have to start somewhere. Alexios shook his head. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Possibly both. A new voice spoke from the corner of the room. Definitely both. All three of them froze. Marcus spun around to find a figure emerging from the shadows near the door. A figure he recognized immediately. Boudica. The name wasn't her real one, of course. It was what the other gladiators called her, because of her fierce red hair and warrior spirit. She was one of the few female gladiators in the Ludus, a Germanic woman captured in the northern campaigns and forced to fight for Roman entertainment. How long have you been there? Marcus demanded. Long enough, Boudica replied, stepping into the light. She was tall for a woman, nearly matching Marcus's height, with powerful arms marked by the scars of combat. I followed you from the arena earlier. Thought you were acting strange. This doesn't concern you, Marcus said coldly. A child marked for the arena, a conspiracy involving Senator Nero, plans for escape. Boudica's green eyes gleamed. It concerns me plenty, especially since you're about to get yourselves and this girl killed with your half-formed plans. Then go report us to the guards, Marcus challenged. Collect your reward. Boudica laughed, though there was no humor in it. Report you? Why would I do that when I can help you? Help us? Alexios looked skeptical. Why would you risk yourself? Because I'm not just another gladiator, Boudica said, moving closer to examine Livia with a warrior's assessing gaze. I'm a mother, was a mother. My children were killed when the Romans burned my village. My son was 8. My daughter was 5. Her voice was steady, but Marcus saw the pain in her eyes, the same pain he felt when he thought of Cassia. They made me watch, Boudica continued, before they dragged me here to die for sport. So yes, I'll help save this child, because every child saved is a small revenge against Rome's cruelty. Marcus studied her, weighing whether to trust her. Boudica was dangerous, a skilled fighter with a reputation for ruthlessness in the arena, but she was also one of the few gladiators who had never lost her humanity, who still had fire in her eyes instead of the dead emptiness most fighters acquired. If you're caught helping us, Marcus warned, the punishment will be severe. I've endured worse, Boudica said simply. She knelt beside the bed, her expression softening as she looked at Livia. What's her name? Livia, Marcus replied. Boudica reached out slowly, giving Livia time to pull away if she wanted. When the child didn't flinch, Boudica gently touched her hair. I had red hair like this when I was young. Before it darkened, she switched to heavily accented Latin so Livia could understand. You're safe now, little one. We won't let them hurt you anymore. Livia's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time they seemed to be tears of hope rather than despair. So, Boudica said, standing and turning to Marcus, what's this plan of yours, and how can I help make it less suicidal? Marcus laid out his idea, contacting Cassia at the market, getting her to smuggle Livia out of Rome, finding a safe place for the child to go. Boudica listened, then shook her head. Your plan has one fatal flaw. Even if this Cassia woman agrees to help, even if she can get the child out of the Ludus, how will Livia survive outside? She can't speak to ask for help. She bears the brand of the condemned, and she's a child vulnerable to every predator and slaver in the empire. What do you suggest? Marcus asked, frustrated. She needs protection, Boudica said. A guardian who can speak for her, who can defend her, who can navigate the world outside Rome. I'll be in the Ludus Magnus, Marcus said. I can't. Not you, Boudica interrupted. Me. Everyone stared at her. You, Alexios said. How? You're as much a prisoner here as Marcus. True, Boudica acknowledged. But I have something Marcus doesn't. I have friends outside these walls. Other captured Germanic warriors who have won their freedom or escaped. They help each other, form a network. If I could get out, I could take the child to them, get her beyond Rome's reach, to the northern territories where she could be free. That's a beautiful dream, Alexios said sarcastically, but how exactly do you plan to escape? You can't just walk out the door. Boudica's smile was sharp as a knife. No, but I can die in the arena. Marcus understood immediately. You want to fake your death. It's been done before, Boudica said. A bladder filled with pig's blood. A coordinated performance, with the right opponent, a physician willing to declare you dead. She looked meaningfully at Alexios. You're insane, the physician said. The risks are no greater than what we're already risking. Boudica cut him off. Besides, I'm scheduled to fight in the Emperor's birthday games anyway. 3 days from now. Perfect timing. Marcus's mind raced through the possibilities. It could work if everything went exactly right, if Boudica could convincingly die in the arena, if Alexios could confirm the death, if they could smuggle her body out with the other corpses, if her friends could be ready to receive her and Livia. Too many ifs. But wasn't that always the case when fighting impossible odds? We need to coordinate this carefully, Marcus said. Every detail has to be perfect. I know someone who can help with that, Boudica said. Divus, the old Germanic fighter in the Retiarius section. He's fought alongside me, trusts me, and he's scheduled to be my opponent in the games. Will he agree to this? Alexios asked. He owes me his life 3 times over, Boudica replied. He'll agree, and he's skilled enough to make it look real, without actually killing me. Livia watched this exchange with wide eyes, clearly understanding that they were planning something dangerous, something that might save her. So the plan is this, Marcus said, laying it out step by step. Tomorrow I contact Cassia at the market, convince her to help. She arranges transport out of the city for when the time comes. Meanwhile, Boudica coordinates with Devas for the staged death in the arena. Alexios, I'll keep the child hidden and healthy, Alexios finished, and declare Boudica dead when the time comes. Gods help us all. And you? Boudica asked Marcus, what happens to you in all this? Once you're transferred to the Ludus Magnus, you can't help anymore. Marcus's jaw tightened. I do what I was brought to do. I fight Priscus. If I win, I'll be free to help. If I lose, he didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what happened if he lost. Livia suddenly grabbed Marcus's hand, shaking her head violently. Her eyes pleaded with him. Don't die, don't leave me. I won't abandon you, Marcus promised, though he knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. But you have to be strong, Livia. Boudica will protect you. She's a warrior, a mother. You can trust her. Livia looked at Boudica, who nodded solemnly. I swear on the graves of my own children, I will protect you with my life. The child seemed to understand the weight of that oath. She released Marcus's hand and reached for Boudica's instead. All right, Alexios said, breaking the emotional moment. We have the outline of a plan. Now we need to handle the details. Marcus, you sleep here tonight. If anyone asks, you're recovering from injuries. Boudica, you need to return to your quarters before you're missed. We'll meet again tomorrow night to finalize everything. Boudica nodded and moved toward the door, then paused. Marcus, that woman Cassia, what if she refuses to help? What if she's loyal to Nero despite how he treated her? Then we find another way, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. And if there is no other way? Marcus looked at Livia, curled on the bed with her mother's letter clutched to her chest. Then I'll make one, even if I have to burn down the entire Ludus to do it. Boudica smiled grimly. Now you're talking like a true Germanic warrior. Perhaps there's hope for you Romans yet. She slipped out into the corridor, leaving Marcus alone with Alexios and Livia. The physician began gathering his supplies. I'll return before dawn with food for the child. Try to get some rest, both of you. Tomorrow will be challenging. After Alexios left, Marcus settled onto the floor beside Livia's bed. The stone was hard and cold, but he'd slept in worse places. Are you afraid? He asked her softly. Livia nodded, then traced on his palm, Areou. Marcus considered lying, then decided she deserved the truth. Yes, but fear is good. It keeps us sharp, keeps us alive. The trick is not to let it control us. He felt her small hand rest on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort from a child who had suffered more than any adult should. It broke something in Marcus, some final wall he'd built around his heart. I'm going to tell you something, he said quietly. Something I've never told anyone. When my daughter died, I wanted to die too. Every day in the arena, part of me hoped for death, for an end to the pain. But I kept surviving, kept winning, and eventually I stopped feeling anything at all. He looked up at Livia. Until I found you. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. A reason to fight that isn't just about survival. A reason to hope. Livia's eyes shimmered with tears. She leaned down and pressed her forehead against his. A gesture of trust, of connection, of shared suffering and shared determination. They stayed like that for a long moment, a broken gladiator and a silent child, finding strength in each other. When Livia finally fell asleep, Marcus remained awake, watching over her. His mind turned over every detail of the plan, looking for flaws, for dangers, for anything he might have missed. The odds were against them. The risks were enormous. The consequences of failure would be death, or worse than death. But for the first time in 15 years, Marcus Flavius wasn't fighting just to survive another day. He was fighting for something worth dying for. And in the darkness beneath the Colosseum, that made all the difference. The Roman morning dawned with its usual chaos, vendors shouting their wares, cartwheels clattering on cobblestones, the endless hum of humanity that made the eternal city pulse with life. Marcus walked through the Forum Market, flanked by 2 guards, their presence a constant reminder of his status as property rather than person. Around him, Rome displayed its wealth and excess. Silk merchants from the east spread their shimmering fabrics in the sunlight. Spice vendors filled the air with exotic scents. Wine sellers offered tastes from amphoras stamped with the seals of distant vineyards. And everywhere, slaves carrying packages, running errands, existing in the spaces between free citizens like shadows. Marcus scanned the crowd, searching for the one face he needed to find, his heart hammered against his ribs. Everything depended on this moment, on finding Cassia Sabina and somehow convincing her to risk everything for a child she'd never met. "Move along, Gladiator," one of his guards grunted, shoving him forward. "You have 15 minutes to make your purchases, then we return." 15 minutes. That was all the freedom he had. Then he saw her, a woman in a simple slave's tunic, her dark hair shot through with grey, examining vegetables at a merchant's stall. She was older than when he'd last seen her, thinner, with the worn look of someone who had survived by learning to make herself invisible. But it was Cassia Sabina. He was certain. Marcus approached slowly, pretending to browse the wares at the neighboring stall. The guard stood a few paces behind, bored and inattentive in the morning heat. "Fresh olives," the merchant called, "the finest in Rome." Marcus picked up an olive, examining it with feigned interest. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke to the woman beside him. "Cassia Sabina, don't react, don't look at me, just listen." He saw her stiffen, her hands freezing over a basket of onions. "My name is Marcus Flavius," he continued quietly. "I'm the gladiator who was condemned by Senator Nero 15 years ago. I need your help." "I don't know what you're talking about," Cassia whispered back, her voice trembling. "Leave me alone. Your master has a daughter. Her name is Livia. She's 10 years old, and she's been marked for death in the arena." Cassia's sharp intake of breath told him he'd struck true. "You knew," Marcus said. "You knew about the child." "How did you?" Cassia stopped herself. "This is madness. I can't help you. If Nero discovers, he'll do what? Demote you further. You're already cleaning chamber pots in the house where you once dined as his mistress." Cassia's face flushed with anger and shame. "You know nothing about my situation. I know you're not the monster he is," Marcus pressed. "I know that somewhere inside you still have a conscience. The child is innocent, Cassia. She's suffered horrors no one should endure. Her tongue was cut out. She was branded like cattle, and in 2 days, unless we save her, she'll be torn apart in the arena while Rome cheers. Why should I believe you? Why should I trust a gladiator?" "Because I have nothing to gain by lying," Marcus said. "And because you already know it's true. You've seen the way Nero's cousin, Marcus Flavius, has been visiting, the whispered conversations, the secret payments. You know something dark is happening." Cassia was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "Julia Marcella, the child's mother. I knew her. She was kind to me when others weren't. After Nero cast me aside, Julia would still greet me in the streets, treat me like a person rather than a discarded thing." "Then help her daughter," Marcus urged. "Help us save an innocent life." "How?" Cassia asked. "What can I possibly do?" Marcus quickly outlined the plan. Boudicca's staged death in the arena, the need to smuggle Livia out of Rome, the network of freed Germanic warriors who could take her north, beyond Nero's reach. "All we need is transportation out of the city," Marcus explained. "A cart, travel papers for a slave, passage to the northern territories. You have access to Nero's household resources. his seal for documents. "You're asking me to commit treason," Cassia interrupted. "To forge documents, steal from the senator, aid in the escape of a condemned prisoner. I'm asking you to save a child's life. And what happens when they discover the deception? When Nero realizes his daughter has escaped, he'll know someone helped her. He'll investigate, question everyone. By then you'll be gone too," Marcus said. "Leave with Livia, start a new life beyond Rome's reach." Cassia laughed bitterly. "Escape? I'm 53 years old, Gladiator. Where would I go? What life could I possibly have? A life where you don't have to serve the man who used you and discarded you," Marcus said. "A life where you can die with honor instead of dying as his property." The guards were growing restless. "Time's up, Gladiator," one called. "Meet me tonight," Marcus said urgently. "The Temple of Vesta after dark. If you decide to help, bring what we need. If not," he paused, "if not, then I'll find another way. But Julia's daughter deserves better than to die for her father's sins." He turned and walked back toward the guards, his heart pounding. Behind him he heard Cassia whisper so quietly he almost missed it. "Temple of Vesta. After dark." That evening Marcus stood in the shadows near the Temple of Vesta, the sacred flame visible through the columns, casting dancing shadows across the marble. He'd slipped away from the ludus using a trick Alexios had arranged, claiming severe stomach illness that required privacy and time in the latrines. It would buy him perhaps an hour before the guards came looking. Footsteps approached. Cassia emerged from the darkness, clutching a bundle wrapped in cloth. "I must be insane," she said without preamble, "risking everything for the daughter of the man who destroyed my life." "You're doing it for Julia," Marcus corrected, "and for the child who deserves a chance." Cassia thrust the bundle at him. "Travel documents for a slave child named Livia. No family name, listing her as property being transferred to a northern estate. Nero's seal, perfectly forged. I've been copying his documents for years. I know every flourish of his signature." Marcus took the bundle, relief flooding through him. "And transportation. There's a merchant named Gaius Petronius who owes me a favor large favor involving a scandal I kept secret. He runs wagons north every 3 days. His next departure is the morning after the Emperor's Games. If your Germanic woman can get the child to his warehouse by dawn that day, he'll take her north, no questions asked." "Thank you," Marcus said with genuine gratitude. "You're saving her life." "Perhaps," Cassia said, "or perhaps I'm sending her to die alone in the wilderness. Either way, it's better than the arena." She paused. "I won't be leaving with her." "What? But you said—" "I said nothing about leaving," Cassia interrupted. "You assumed I'm too old to start over, Gladiator, and someone needs to stay behind to misdirect the investigation when they discover the child is missing. I can buy her time by feeding Nero false information, pointing suspicion elsewhere. They'll kill you when they discover the truth," Marcus said. "Eventually, yes." Cassia's smile was sad. "But I'll die having done one good thing in my wasted life." "That's more than most people in Rome can say." Before Marcus could respond, she pressed something else into his hand, a small leather purse heavy with coins. "For the child's future," Cassia explained. "Money I've hidden over the years. It's not much, but it might help her survive." Marcus stood speechless, humbled by this woman's courage. "There's something else you should know," Cassia said quietly. "About Nero. He didn't know about Julia Marcella's pregnancy. His cousin Marcus Flavius discovered the affair and has been blackmailing Nero for months, threatening to reveal it to the emperor. The scandal would destroy Nero's political career, an illegitimate daughter with a slave woman. So Marcus Flavius found Livia. After Julia died, Marcus reasoned and decided to eliminate the evidence while continuing to blackmail Nero. Exactly. 2 birds with 1 stone, blackmail, money, and no loose ends. Cassia's face hardened. Men like them see people as tools, obstacles or opportunities. Nothing more. "Not all men," Marcus said softly. No, Cassius agreed, studying his scarred face. Not all men. Julius spoke of you once, you know, said you were the last honorable soldier Rome produced. That's why Nero worked so hard to destroy you. You reminded him of everything he wasn't. Footsteps echoed in the distance, the temple guards making their rounds. I must go, Cassius said. And so must you. The games are in 2 days. May the gods protect that child, and may they grant you victory in the arena. I won't need the gods, Marcus said grimly. I have something better, a reason to survive. Cassius nodded and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the precious documents that represented Livia's only hope. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and mounting tension. Marcus was transferred to the Ludus Magnus as planned, the Emperor's Gladiator school where Rome's finest fighters trained and lived. The accommodations were better than his previous Ludus: private cells, quality food, even a small courtyard garden. But it was still a prison, still a place where men prepared to die for entertainment. Priscus, his opponent, trained in the same courtyard. The Gaul was everything the rumors claimed: tall, powerfully built, moving with the fluid grace of a born killer. He acknowledged Marcus with a nod, but no words. There was nothing to say. In the arena, only one would leave alive. Meanwhile, back at the original Ludus, Alexius cared for Livia in secret, feeding her, treating her wounds, slowly building her strength. Boudica spent hours teaching the child simple hand signals, ways to communicate without words, and Cassius made the final arrangements, ensuring everything was in place for the desperate gamble they were about to attempt. The morning of the Emperor's birthday games dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for watching people die. Marcus stood in the underground chamber beneath the arena, breathing in the familiar scent of sand, blood and fear. Around him, other gladiators prepared for battle, checking weapons, saying prayers to gods who rarely listened, making peace with their mortality. A guard approached. Flavius, you're in the final match against Priscus. But first, you're to fight in the preliminary round, Senator Nero's special request. Marcus's blood ran cold. What preliminary round? Against the condemned prisoners, the guard explained with a cruel smile. Some entertainment before the main event. You'll face 3, should be easy work for Rome's great champion. Marcus's mind raced. 3 condemned prisoners. One of them would be Livia. I won't do it, he said flatly. The guard laughed. You don't have a choice, slave. It's already arranged. You fight the condemned, then you rest, then you face Priscus. Senator Nero specifically requested you for this honor. Of course he did. Even if Nero didn't know Livia's true identity, his cousin Marcus Flavius would have suggested this, forcing Marcus to kill the child he'd tried to save, breaking him before the final battle with Priscus. The guard left, and Marcus stood frozen, his carefully laid plans crumbling around him. How could he save Livia now? If he refused to fight her, he'd be executed on the spot. If he fought her, he couldn't. He simply couldn't. Alexius appeared from the shadows, his face pale. You've heard about the condemned prisoners? Yes. Livia is one of them, Alexius confirmed. They took her from the medical chamber this morning. I couldn't stop them without revealing everything. Can we still proceed with Boudica's plan? Boudica fights in the second round, against Adalvis. If all goes according to plan, she'll die, I'll confirm it, and she'll be carried out with the corpses. But that doesn't help with Livia. Marcus's fists clenched. I won't kill her. I'll find another way. What other way? Alexius asked desperately. The moment you refuse to fight, the guards will cut you both down. Marcus had no answer. His mind churned through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. The roar of the crowd above signaled the beginning of the games. Soon, very soon, he would be called to the arena floor, and he would have to choose between keeping his promise to Livia or watching her die anyway. The arena sand burned beneath the afternoon sun as Marcus emerged from the gate of life. 70,000 Romans screamed their approval, their faces blurred into a sea of bloodlust. In the imperial box, Emperor Commodus sat surrounded by his entourage, with Senator Nero just a few seats away, his face carefully neutral. "Marcus? Marcus? Marcus?" The chant washed over him, meaningless noise. His eyes scanned the arena, looking for Livia. Then he saw her. The condemned were chained together, 3 figures in filthy tunics, marked with the brands of criminals. 2 were men, hardened criminals by their bearing, and the third, Livia, stood between them, so small, so fragile. The chains around her wrists were far too heavy for her thin arms. Her dark hair hung in her face, but when she looked up and saw Marcus, her eyes went wide with recognition and desperate hope. She thought he was here to save her. She didn't understand that he was here to kill her. The crowd's roar intensified as a gate opened and weapons were thrown into the sand. Gladiator swords for each of the condemned. The guards unchained them and retreated, leaving the 3 prisoners to face Marcus alone. The 2 men grabbed their weapons immediately. They had nothing to lose. Death was certain, but at least they could die fighting. They separated, trying to flank Marcus, using basic tactics born of desperation. Livia picked up her sword with trembling hands. The weapon was absurdly large for her, the point dragging in the sand. She looked at Marcus, her eyes asking a question he couldn't answer. The crowd grew impatient, their cheers turning to jeers. "Kill them!" someone shouted. "Blood! Blood! Blood!" Marcus gripped his own gladius, his mind racing. He could kill the 2 men easily. They were untrained, desperate, already defeated. But Livia, one of the men, charged. Marcus sidestepped and struck with the flat of his blade, knocking the man unconscious rather than killing him. The crowd booed. They wanted death, not mercy. The second man was smarter, more careful. He circled Marcus while Livia remained frozen, unable to move, unable to fight, unable to even cry out for mercy. In the imperial box, Emperor Commodus leaned forward, interested now. This wasn't going as expected. The second man lunged. Marcus parried and struck him down with a blow to the temple, another unconscious body rather than a corpse. The crowd's displeasure grew louder. Now only Livia remained. She stood 10 paces away, sword trembling in her small hands, her eyes locked on Marcus. She didn't try to attack. She didn't try to run. She simply waited, trusting him, believing he would save her. The crowd's chant changed. "Kill, kill, kill." Marcus walked toward her slowly. Each step felt like walking through sand, through water, through the weight of every failure and loss in his life. When he reached her, he knelt, bringing his eyes level with hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so quietly only she could hear. "I tried. I swear I tried." Livia's lip trembled, but she nodded. She understood. In this world, trying wasn't enough. She dropped her sword and spread her arms, exposing her chest, offering him an easy kill, a quick death. Even now, even facing death, she was trying to help him, to make it easier for him. The crowd howled for blood. Marcus raised his gladius. Livia closed her eyes, and Marcus made his choice. He turned and hurled his sword at the imperial box. The blade spun through the air, glinting in the sunlight, and embedded itself in the wooden frame just inches from Senator Nero's head. The entire Colosseum fell silent in shock. "I refuse," Marcus roared, his voice carrying across the arena. "I am Marcus Flavius, once a centurion of Rome. I will not murder a child for your entertainment." The silence shattered into chaos. Guards poured into the arena. The crowd erupted, some shouting approval, others demanding his death. In the imperial box, Emperor Commodus stood, his face a mask of fury. Marcus didn't try to fight. He stood protectively in front of Livia, as the guards surrounded them, spears pointed at his chest. "Wait," Commodus's voice cut through the chaos. The young emperor descended from the box, entering the arena, an unprecedented move that stunned everyone into silence. Commodus approached Marcus, studying him with the calculating gaze of a madman. "You dare defy me? In my own games, I dare defy cruelty, Marcus said steadily. This child is innocent. I won't kill her to satisfy blood sport. Innocent? Commodus laughed. She's branded as condemned. She's Senator Nero's daughter, Marcus said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. His illegitimate child, marked for death to hide a scandal. Her mother was Julia Marcella, a slave woman who died 3 weeks ago. The child was branded and her tongue cut out to silence her, to prevent her from revealing her true identity. The crowd gasped. Senator Nero's face went white as a sheet. You lie, Nero shouted from the box. This is a gladiator's desperate fantasy. Then explain this, Cassia Sabina's voice rang out as she appeared at the arena's edge, holding up documents. Julia Marcella's letters to you, Senator. Her diary describing your affair, and the birth record of your daughter Livia, witnessed by 2 physicians who signed their names. How she'd gotten into the arena Marcus didn't know, but her appearance changed everything. The crowd turned to stare at Nero, hungry for this new scandal. Commodus's eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. He lived for moments like this, exposing the hypocrisy of senators, watching powerful men squirm. Is this true, Senator? No. She's lying. They're all lying. But Nero's panic was obvious. Bring the documents, Commodus ordered. Guards retrieved them from Cassia, and the emperor examined them himself. His smile grew wider with each page. How delicious, Commodus said. A senator's bastard, condemned to die in my games to hide a scandal, and a gladiator willing to sacrifice himself to save her. He turned to the crowd, his voice carrying to every corner of the Colosseum. People of Rome, what shall we do? The crowd's response was divided, some shouting for death, others calling for mercy, but the loudest voices demanded justice, demanded that Nero answer for his crimes. Commodus raised his hand for silence. I decree thus, the child Livia is pardoned. She will be placed in the care of the Vestal Virgins, where her true parentage will be verified. If she is indeed Senator Nero's daughter, he will be held accountable. Relief flooded through Marcus, but Commodus wasn't finished. However, Marcus Flavius has defied my games, broken sacred tradition. For this, there must be punishment. The emperor's voice turned cold. You will fight Priscus as planned. But now the stakes are different. If you win, you gain your freedom and guardianship of the child. If you lose, you die, and the child's fate will be reconsidered. Marcus understood immediately. Win and Livia lived. Lose and she might still die despite the pardon. I accept, Marcus said without hesitation. Excellent. Commodus clapped his hands. Take the child to safety. Prepare Flavius for the final match. And someone arrest Senator Nero for questioning. As guards led a protesting Nero away and Vestal Virgins came to collect Livia, the child broke free for just a moment. She ran to Marcus and threw her arms around him, her small body shaking with silent sobs. I'll win, Marcus promised, holding her tightly. For you, for Cassia, for my daughter's memory. I'll win. Livia pulled back and placed her small hand over his heart, as if trying to give him her strength. Then the Vestals gently led her away, and Marcus watched her go, knowing his next fight would determine both their futures. An hour later, Marcus stood once more on the arena sand. Across from him, Priscus waited, the undefeated champion, the beast of the north, the man who had never known defeat. The crowd was delirious with anticipation. 2 slaves fighting for freedom, a gladiator defending a child's life, a scandal involving a senator. This was better than any scripted entertainment. Fight to the death, Commodus declared from the imperial box. And may the gods favor the worthy. The signal was given. Priscus attacked immediately, his speed incredible for a man his size. His sword whistled through the air where Marcus's head had been a moment before. Marcus rolled, came up, blocked a strike that would have split him in half. They circled each other, each looking for an opening. The crowd roared with every exchange, every near miss, every display of skill. Marcus fought with everything he had, not the cold, mechanical fighting of survival, but the passionate, desperate fighting of a man with everything to lose. He thought of Livia's trusting eyes, of Cassia's sacrifice, of Boudica waiting in the shadows to whisk the child to safety once this was over. He thought of his daughter, Cassia, of the promise he'd made to save one child when he'd failed to save his own. Priscus was stronger, faster, younger, but Marcus had something the Gaul lacked, a reason beyond survival to fight. Their swords clashed again and again, neither able to gain advantage. The afternoon sun beat down, turning the sand to fire beneath their feet. Sweat poured into Marcus's eyes, mixing with blood from a dozen small cuts. Then Priscus made a mistake, a tiny overextension, a fraction of a second where his guard dropped. Marcus didn't think, he simply acted. His sword found the gap in Priscus' defense, sliding between the ribs, piercing the Gaul's heart. Priscus's eyes widened in surprise. He looked down at the blade in his chest, then at Marcus. Then he smiled, a warrior's smile that acknowledged a worthy opponent. He fell. The crowd's roar was deafening. Marcus stood over his fallen opponent, chest heaving, barely believing what had happened. "Victor," Commodus declared, "Marcus Flavius is the victor." Vestal virgins entered the arena, bringing Livia with them. She ran to Marcus, and he caught her in his arms, lifting her up as the crowd cheered. Her tears soaked his shoulder, and he felt his own tears mixing with the blood and sweat on his face. "Freedom," Commodus announced. "Marcus Flavius has won his freedom, and guardianship of the child Livia." The wooden sword, the rudest symbol of a gladiator's freedom, was presented to Marcus. After 15 years of slavery, of blood and sand and death, he was finally free. But more than that, he had saved an innocent life. He had kept his promise. The small farm north of Rome was modest, but peaceful. Olive trees dotted the hillside, and a stream ran through the property, providing fresh water and a pleasant sound. It was purchased with the winnings from Marcus's final fight and the money Cassia had given them, enough for a fresh start. Marcus stood in the doorway watching Livia play in the garden with Boudica, who had successfully faked her death and joined them after the games. The child was learning sign language from Boudica, developing new ways to communicate, and slowly, very slowly, she was learning to smile again. Alexios had joined them too, leaving his contract with the Ludus behind to practice medicine in the nearby town. The old physician claimed it was purely practical. Someone needed to monitor Livia's recovery, but Marcus suspected it was more than that. They had all become a strange kind of family, bound by trauma and triumph. Cassia Sabina had not survived the investigation into Senator Nero's crimes. She'd been executed as an accomplice, but not before her testimony had brought down both Nero and his cousin Marcus Flavius. Both men were exiled, stripped of their wealth and titles. Some said it was a mercy they weren't executed. Others said exile was worse than death. Marcus thought Cassia would have been satisfied with that justice. Livia suddenly ran toward the house, her face alight with joy. She'd found something, a small bird's egg, unbroken, perfect. She showed it to Marcus with such pride, such innocent happiness. He knelt beside her, examining the egg with appropriate seriousness. "We should return it to the nest," he said. "The mother will be worried." Livia nodded and carefully took the egg back outside. Marcus watched her go. This child, who had survived the worst Rome could inflict, who was slowly healing, slowly becoming whole again. "She asked about you this morning," Boudica said, approaching from the garden. "She used the sign language Livia was learning. Asked if you're her father now." Marcus's throat tightened. "What did you tell her?" "That you're whatever she needs you to be." That evening, after a simple meal shared with their makeshift family, Marcus sat with Livia watching the sunset. She leaned against him, her small hand in his scarred one. She spelled out words on his palm. THANKYOUFORSAVING, Emmy. You saved me too, Marcus replied softly. You gave me back my humanity. You reminded me what's worth fighting for. Livia looked up at him, then spelled LOVEYOUFATHER. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. He pulled her close, holding her as he'd once held his own daughter, as he'd wished he could have held her one last time. I love you too, he whispered. My brave, beautiful girl. In the distance, the lights of Rome glowed against the darkening sky, the city that had tried to destroy them both. But here, on this small farm under the Roman stars, they had found something the empire could never take away. They had found family, they had found peace, they had found redemption. And most precious of all, they had found love in the ruins of cruelty, hope in the depths of despair, and light in the darkest places of the human heart. Marcus looked down at Livia, who had fallen asleep in his arms, her mother's letter still tucked inside her tunic, close to her heart. He thought of Julia Marcella's final words, "Be strong, my sweet Livia. Remember that your mother loved you more than all the stars in the sky." She would be proud of you, Marcus whispered to the sleeping child. And I promise, I swear on everything I am, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that you are loved, that you matter, that you are worth fighting for. The stars emerged one by one, filling the sky with light. And in that small house on the hillside, a gladiator who had learned that the greatest victory wasn't in the arena, and a child who had survived the impossible began their new life together. Not as master and slave, not as victim and savior, but as father and daughter, as family, as hope reborn from the ashes of Rome's cruelty. And in the gentle darkness of the Roman night, that was enough. That was everything.